All right, what's going on, everyone? We got a Marshal King stream today. I was almost gonna say Dr. Stone. We got chapter 1 of the Marshal King. I read this yesterday. I really like it. It's a solid start so far. There's a lot to unpack. But also no, there isn't, which is sort of my one complaint so far. But yeah, I like the Marshal King. I'm excited to talk about it. I'm glad I read it yesterday because now that I know what happens, I can kind of just like read the chapter and pick it apart because there's a lot of layers to the chapter. Given that it's only the first chapter, I think as the story progresses, this chapter will make a lot more sense. Excuse me. We got Josh in chat. Josh, how you doing? We got Blitzdrake. Blitzdrake, good to see ya. Gonna say it. Jim Godspeed is better than Luffy and Naruto already. Well, it's funny because Boichi tends to draw his like protagonists very similarly. Like Jim's face looks very similar to Senku's and Ryusui's. And because of that, because he has the same haircut, he looks almost identical to Boichi's Ace from when he did the Ace short story. Thank you to Michael Ramirez for the subscription. Another one joins the kingdom of science. They wrote his name as Goodspeed? Pretty sure they didn't. Let me see. Yeah, you probably read a scan because if you read the official translation on Manga Plus, then it's Godspeed. So I'm not really sure what you're talking about. Also, speaking of translations, the Marshal King is translated by the amazing David Evelyn, who, if you don't recognize that name, he does a bunch of work for Viz, but he also is famous for being the translator for Undead Unluck. So if there's any Undead Unluck fans out there, we are carrying that. They just changed it today? Oh. I don't remember that being a thing, but I could be wrong. Anyway, so I want to give my first impression from when I read this yesterday, and then we'll sort of go through the chapter and pick it apart. Because I didn't really have a chance to deeply analyze this chapter yesterday. I just sort of read it, got like a decent understanding of it, and kind of shared my first thoughts over on Twitter. He's also doing Sid Craft's translation. Yeah, he does a bunch of stuff. He's a hard-working translator, and he, like certain other people, he is a good... He's a good personality and a good influence in this community, so I appreciate his work, and overall just gets my thumbs up. He gets the Shonen Ouji stamp of approval. Yo and Rusoi Fusion gonna be top 5 new gen pro tag. I wouldn't really call him... I wouldn't really say he's got Yo energy, because Yo's kind of lazy, and I guess if anything, he's got Ryusui energy, because Ryusui wanted to like own everything. He does seem to want fame. He does seem to want fame. Also, we're gonna start looking at the chapter, but one thing I'm curious is, what did everyone think of the Dr. Stone episode yesterday? So it would have been Dr. Stone season 4 episode 5, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. I liked the episode. I liked all the character performances. I feel like it was a little too slow. I could be wrong. My opinion might change towards the end of this core, but I felt like they really didn't adapt that much for that episode. I felt like it was less than 2 chapters. Excuse me. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started. Excuse me. So, if you turn to page 1, and I'm reading this right from Manga Plus, it opens with a quote from the Bible, a quote from its Ecclesiastes. Generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever. So right away, it sets this sort of desolate wouldn't be the right word, but sort of like, I don't know, survivalist tone, where it's like, you know, humanity's gonna do their thing, but the earth is always gonna survive. I would say that it does the follow of writing how to do a Western. Yeah, so I really didn't see the steampunk element coming, but as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, that makes sense. Because Boichi mostly does science fiction. So when he announced he was doing a Western, I was like, oh, that's cool. And then when I saw the steampunk, you know, science fiction stuff, I was like, I knew it. I knew it had to be somewhere. So I was surprised, but it also makes perfect sense. And it's funny because you turn to the second page and it says this generation belonged to the Desperados. Now, as far as I know, we don't get any sort of timeline for this world. All we know is that it's in the US, or some version of the US, and it's out in the West, out in the deserts. And when you turn to the second page, there seems to be remnants of some sort of futuristic civilization. We got Party Jams in the chat. Party Jams, I have a question for you. And we got Justin. It's a party. So Party Jams and Justin, my question for you, as we're reading The Marshal King, what did you think of yesterday's Dr. Stone episode? I thought it was good, but I thought it was a little slow. Excuse me. Jose says, Boichi going Western. Like Usagi Yojimbo style. Oh, yeah, I guess. That's a good point. Glad Jimmy did to his dad what Gon failed to do. I don't really think Gon should have killed his dad. Not too sure about that one. We also, that was an interesting point about this chapter. We don't really know the history between these two characters. Okay, so Justin agrees with me about Dr. Stone. I enjoyed yesterday's episode. Was definitely slower than usual. Yeah. So surprisingly, I was surprised from how they had described the opening to this story on Twitter. I thought it was going to open with the main character, Jim Godspeed, but we don't. We open with his father, who I believe is named M. Godspeed. But we see his back. He says, "My partner's in crime. My son is on the way." He's called the Great M. Godspeed. So clearly he has the respect of all desperados, or he's at least famous among all desperados. Yeah, Thursdays are going to be crazy. Unfortunately, it's not every Thursday. It's bi-weekly. But those Thursdays where it does drop is going to be awesome. Didn't feel slow to me. One thing the anime did better than the manga is Zeno introduced himself. Also, the pilot hints dropped were great too. Yeah, I felt like they had kind of fleshed out that introduction. I'll have to go back and read it. But I definitely got the feeling that they had added a few touches in yesterday's episode. Oh, so this is something interesting. So M. Godspeed points out that when Jim comes, he should have 10 million. Oh, so that makes sense. I think he's talking about the bounty, so that was like foreshadowing. The steampunk western reminds me of the steampunk samurai series, Samurai 7? Samurai 7. I've never heard of Samurai 7. Huh. That looks pretty dope. I'll have to check it out. Is that a TV series? Yeah, TV series. How many episodes is it? "26 episodes. That's not bad. What studio is it? Gonzo? That's not bad. His dad's bounty is only 10 million. Luffy's was 30. So remember, Berry in One Piece are kind of like yen. So there is that, what's the word? Not trade-off, not translation. Dollar to yen. There's that like exchange rate. So they are using, this does take place in the US. We don't quite know what version of the US this is, but it is some kind of version of the US. Conversion rate, that was the word I was looking for. Thank you. Anyway, so M. Godspeed is like, yeah, look out for my son. He's going to be here with $10 million. And they're like, okay, so are we robbing this train or what? and they describe him as your M. Godspeed, the outlaw who has ruled this desert for hundreds of years. So that also is a big hint that there's something different than the usual, Western, right? I mean, this guy has gold arms, everything's steampunk, and this guy has lived for hundreds of years. A living legend with fortunes untold, the possessor of the golden arms. I'm curious to see what happens with these gold arms, because they make it a big deal and we don't really see what they do, I don't think. Hope Jim is a patriot and helps a funny Valentine. That would be a nice crossover. Although the timelines don't seem to match up. I like how the mech looks like something Toriyama would draw, but with the edge. The mecha arms mean he's a cyborg. The tech of the arms kept him alive. That's what I'm guessing. But again, it's not spelled out for us quite yet. So M. Godspeed says, as long as my son lives, my riches are meaningless. He's coming to kill me. So I hope that in the next few chapters, not only is the relationship between Jim and his father explained, but we get at least somewhat of an explanation of how they sort of came up with this plan. Going Western ain't a style for Japanese audiences. I mean, that's not necessarily true, right? I mean, I feel like that's kind of a overbroad generalization. I mean, Cowboy Bebop is technically like a Western, right? To an extent. Because you can have a Western without it taking place in the West so much. It can have the same themes, right? So Cowboy Bebop is like a Western, right? With air quotes. Golden Kamuy is a Western, like air quotes, because it's not in the US, but it's got all the same themes, a lot of the same tropes, and it's in the same time. Steel Ball Run, that's a great example. Steel Ball Run is very much a Western. So this idea that Westerns can't do well in Japan is just not true. And to tie it to Sonic, it has nothing to do with that. I have to say, I was very surprised. Like, the first thing, I kind of overlooked the whole steampunk aspect until the train came out. And I was like, okay, so that's definitely not how trains look. And this, like, giant tower of a thing comes out. And I'm just like, oh. It's called the Intercontinental U.S. Central Bank Gold Transport Train IGTN 500 series. Something else to note, M. Godspeed is apparently famous enough that this U.S. bank captain spots him seemingly miles away. And, well, okay, it looks like maybe a mile tops, but like hundreds of, like a football field away, and he instantly knows who he is. So he's so famous that people know what he looks like. Um, and clearly, this is like some kind of mix of steampunk and science fiction. Because, like, if you look at this train, it's got these crazy robot arms and these crazy guns. And then, of course, you have the golden arms. So he goes to rob the train and instantly recognizes the presence of his son. And he goes, "So you're finally here, aren't you, my boy? Fine, I accept your duel, but don't expect me to go easy on you. But first things first, it's time for some fun and crimes. Let's join forces. It takes more than having a bad heart to be an outlaw. You've got to commit a few crimes. We're on the precipice of a once-in-a-lifetime Godspeed team-up. Outlaws Super Magnum the Gladiator. Remember, we are Godspeed." So, for whatever reason, Boichi really wants to like keep a secret. Wants to keep the relationship between Jim and M Godspeed a secret. Because even in this interaction, we don't see Jim at all. We just see M Godspeed. And M Godspeed seemingly doesn't even know what Jim's intentions are. Because there's no suggestion that he knows that Jim wants to be a marshal. He knows that he wants to duel him, but he doesn't seem to know that he's thinking of being a marshal. So they seem to have a very vague agreement, but the details aren't clear, which I like, because now I'm kind of curious to find out what happened. Fast forward 2 months, and so something I missed. We get a panel that says shot 1, and then when we get the spread of Jim carrying the coffin, it also says part 1, the Academy. So it seems like Boichi might be doing the Dr. Stone thing where he splits the story up into parts, and that this is part 1, and then there'll be like a part 2, 3, 4, etc. It also implies, so something I was wondering, I guess until now, is like how much does Boichi have planned? Because obviously when you pitch a manga, right, it's like a TV show, you have to have a certain amount of it planned out already for when you pitch it to the people in charge. But for especially something like Manga Plus, where they kind of just let you upload whenever, and if it's not working, it's not working. But if it's working, they're like, all right, cool, just keep making stuff. It seems like if Boichi is already splitting up the story into parts, then the implication is that he already has a pretty, somewhat of a concrete outline for the story. So hopefully that means that this story is going to feel like it's been carefully planned out. Am I excited for the TBATE anime? If I'm being totally honest, I don't even know what that means. I have to look that up. Oh, you know what? The beginning after the end. Who was it that told me about that? Somebody told me about that. that's supposed to come out this year. And somebody told me it's supposed to be pretty good. M just means Mr. I'm not too sure that's true. Yeah, I love Boichi's art style. I wouldn't call it realistic, but it does have a lot of detail. What's it called? If you're talking about the anime, the beginning after the end. I can't remember, but somebody told me about it. It might have been Sean. I can't remember. Excuse me. So, we meet Jim. His first introduction, excuse me, is he is carrying this giant coffin that presumably he, built himself. It's got a bunch of numbers on it. It says Godspeed, Dead Man Walking. And he's butt-ass naked. And he tells us he's been eating, mice and lizards and whatever he can find in the desert. So he comes across this sheriff. The sheriff's got, his posse. And they're all on these, steampunk ATV-looking things. Although I think they're more like dirt bikes. So he tells them right up front, they're like, who the heck are you? And he goes, I'm Jim Godspeed, son of M Godspeed. And they're like, wait a minute, how did you kill this guy? And he goes, yeah, I killed him. And as proof, they open up the coffin. There's a corpse in the coffin that, given the way the face is drawn, we know it's been 2 months, so presumably that's a 2-month-old body. But he's still intact. We can kind of tell if you look at his torso that he was shot up. At least that's what it looks like. Of course, he's got the golden arms. He doesn't have his hat. So if we look at Jim, did M Godspeed have that same hat? Or was it a different hat? I can't tell. As a matter of fact, I think Jim takes his father's hat because it looks almost identical. So something to note about that, right? Is the only thing he took was his hat, presumably. And then, so another thing to note, right? So they confirm, the sheriff's posse confirms that Godspeed's bounty is $10 million. So, if you remember, Godspeed said, when my son comes, he's going to have $10 million. So Godspeed seemed to know, that that he was going to die and Jim was going to be carrying him. So that much seems to have been agreed upon previously. He killed his old man for the money. This guy's as cold-blooded as they come. Now, there seems to be an implication that the lawmen in this area are not exactly stand-up guys, right? Like at the first chance they they plan on pushing a guy into a cliff and taking his dead father's corpse for money and the golden arms. And then they show that we see the sheriff, he says, happens all the time in the age of desperados, and he gives a smile, and it's not colored, but based on the detail and the way the smile is drawn, you can just picture he's got these like nasty yellow teeth. Excuse me. But then probably the most steampunk aspect of this whole chapter is you have this canyon, and under the canyon there's this whole giant system of like steel beams and pipes, and there's even like a little bridge. So you're like, what the hell is going on there, right? Because what is like all this technology doing under the desert? And then when they're about to push Jim into the canyon, they get attacked by this giant robot drill monster thing and these subterranean cowboys. Which is about the least Western thing in this whole chapter. They're like almost mole men. Notice how Jim gets heated telling them, don't touch my father. Oh, that's a possibility. Again, we don't see what happens. They cut everything out, so we don't really see what happens. The only thing that seems to suggest that Jim's father did get shot was that he seems to have a bunch of gun holes in his chest. Keep your hands off my father. Stay out of my business. So he takes the cover to the coffin, whips it around, destroys the tank, slices these guys in half. Like, this is a brutal scene. They try to shoot Jim. He blocks himself with the coffin top. They say he stopped a 105 millimeter armor-piercing buckshot with the lid of a coffin. Something to note as well, this wouldn't have been totally out of reach for characters in a Western timeline, but the gun Jim uses in this scene is some kind of semi-automatic handgun. So it's like a Glock or, like a semi-automatic Smith & Wesson. It even says Smith & Wesson on the ammo, so it could very well be some kind of Smith & Wesson gun. But that's more of a modern gun. So it almost feels... It would partially feel out of place in a Western, because that would be pretty advanced. Obviously, they're going to have a lot of revolvers and repeaters. But even more so in a steampunk story where they're going to have all these like crazy, convoluted looking steampunk guns. But he shoots everyone up. He takes the top of the coffin. He says, I may be knocking at death's door, but I'll make sure you never forget the name of the best in the West, Jim Godspeed. So he cuts the whole tank in two. So clearly, he's got some pretty strong abilities. Something to note that really stood out to me. He says, this generation really is a blast. This truly is the age of desperados. So I felt weird about that at first. I'm going to read the comments in a second. I felt weird about this at first, but I almost feel like if M. Godspeed was hundreds of years old and Jim is the son of M. Godspeed, and he's saying this generation as opposed to other generations, I feel like Jim Godspeed is older than he looks. And or, this is my theory, he is somehow the clone of M. Godspeed and not just like normally his son. So he's kind of like the Boba Fett to M. Godspeed's Jango Fett, right? Like he's just a clone. And that's why they don't really have a much of a relationship. But anyway, now that he's marked everyone, Jim says, hey, that academy is around here, right? And he's like, you don't mean the Western U.S. Marshal Training Institute? And he goes, yeah, that's the one. Which I didn't really know they had a martial training system. That might be a Boichi thing, but that might also be real life. My understanding is that back in the day, marshals were kind of like sheriffs, and they were just like, hey, we need someone to do it. You want to do it? Great, cool. Thanks. But I could be wrong. He says that school is all elites. They'll kill you. And Jim says they offer special enrollment. Anyone can join so long as they can prove they're worthy of being a marshal, and it's a marshal's job to take out outlaws. So then the sheriff says you killed your father and crossed the desert so you could enroll in the marshal's academy. And then Jim says, well, not quite, but if that's what you believe, that'll do. The one thing that's certain is I'm aiming to be a marshal. So again, this is another instance of like, they're clearly making it a mystery what this arrangement was between Jim and his father, which I like. So it feels like it's going to be a big part of the story and not just like the premise. Disposing of outlaws is all in a day's work for a marshal. It was never about the bounty. He kind of puts the sheriff to shame because the sheriff was kind of a piece of shit, basically. And so I reached the town and was approved to enroll in the academy I was aiming for, the Western U.S. Marshal Training Institute. So, I have some questions and some thoughts now that I've read this chapter a second time, but let's take a look at chat. Hyper realistic is what I call Boichi style. Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it. I've been trying to get into Westerns lately. I would recommend, if you want to get into Western movies, I would recommend, well, if you like video games, play the Red Dead Redemption games. But for movies, The Unforgiven is good. Tombstone is good. Django Unchained is good. The Hateful Eight is really good. And then all of the Clint Eastwood movies are good. Boichi's eyes and thighs aren't realistic at all. I wouldn't say they're unrealistic, but they're definitely stylized for sure. To intrigue you and make you want to watch Samurai 7, let me tell you about the economy. They have giant spaceships, yet men are willing to fight and die to protect a small village's rice harvest. That sounds pretty cool. So it sounds like there's some uh, there's sort of a economy thing going on. The dialogue makes me think time travel. Time travel is always a possibility, especially in this day and age of fiction. But my gut says clone. I feel like he's a clone. What time period is this based on? Because most steampunk genre take place in the 1800s. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't really know what the time is. There's a few things that are kept vague in this chapter. The relationship between Jim and his father, and then when this is supposed to take place. My guess would be, honestly, I have no idea, because the whole like tunnels and steam pipes under the desert thing gives me the feeling that this is like way in the future, but I don't know. I remember Django. That was quite a film. Django is one of the best movies I've ever watched. I don't know if it's necessarily top 10, but I could watch that movie a million times and it just gets better. Most cowboy movies and shows have some steampunk elements. No, they don't. Not fundamentally, no. He's only the best in the West because he knows Chihiro is the best in the East. I don't know that they take place at the same time, but I will give you that one. What is the steampunk manga name? If you're talking about the one we're talking about right now, it's the Marshal King. Oh yeah, what was the Western Will Smith was in? I know what you're talking about, but I can't remember it. Um, yeah, and there was that movie Cowboys and Aliens, which, excuse me, I don't remember anyone really saying anything bad about, but it's one of those movies that's just like, hey, you like cowboys, you know, now they're gonna fight aliens. Like, okay. So I have questions, right? So, well, first, so my first issue I took with this chapter, I want to start with my issues and questions. Well, okay, let me start with what I like. Um, I like the art, obviously. Um, I like the first half of this chapter, and the second half is a little confusing. So the first chapter I really like. I like how we open with another character, and then the second half is about our main character. I think that's really interesting. Um, I like the world. I like the mystery behind the whole steampunk element, right? Um, there's clearly a deliberate level of detail in what kind of technology is being used in each scene. Um, I like Jim so far. There's a lot of mystery around his character, which is good to the extent that I'm interested to find out more about him. But right now, he is kind of a vague character, and as a result, he doesn't stand out yet. Like right now, he is literally just steampunk ace, which isn't saying much because One Piece is pretty much steampunk. So really, he's just cowboy ace, sort of. Which is fine because it's only the first chapter. But it's not like, you know, a One Piece chapter 1 or like a Bleach chapter 1 where like by the end of that first chapter, you know what this character is about, basically. You know that Jim has an outlaw father and that he's the kind of person that will murk a bunch of gangsters and wants to be a marshal and doesn't really care about money. But like, we don't really know his quirks, I guess. So Boichi does a really good job of building suspense and tension out of mystery. But I feel like this chapter is almost a little too vague. Which could end up being a complete non-issue after 10 chapters. But again, as of week 1, chapter 1, I feel like someone could be 50-50 on this manga and read this first chapter, and because it's like so vague about the main character, just be like, you know, that's not really enough for me. I don't really know if I like this character. It's vague enough that someone could say he feels bland, and I would totally understand why. Ace was in Alabasta. He's truly a cowboy. That's true. He also dresses like a cowboy. I like the colors used. Yeah, that's something I want to talk about as well. So at least in this chapter, Boichi kind of does a he kind of does like a Schindler's List thing, but not to the extent of Schindler's List. Because if you've seen the movie Schindler's List, the movie is entirely in black and white, except for like the one little girl who we see that she's dressed in red. Besides that, the entire movie is in black and white. Now this chapter is mostly black and white. It has color pages to open. It will occasionally have colored highlights. Highlights feels like the best description. Because after the color pages, the first thing we see is like all the desperados are kind of like silverish. Then it goes black and white. And then it cuts to M. Godspeed. And when he's giving his stare, we can see that he has brown eyes, or like these like brownish eyes. Then it's black and white. The sky has like a teal hint to it. And then the gold arms are obviously gold. Excuse me. So it's weird because he like kind of jumps back and forth between color and not color. So it feels like it's half highlighting important things. Well, it feels like it's three things. It feels like it's one part highlighting important things, one part creating dramatic effect. Like if he colors the sun, then it emphasizes the intensity of the sun. And then it just feels like one part, well, he kind of wants to color the chapters, but he also wants to be efficient, so he's like half coloring them, is what it feels like to me. But I find it interesting that he's like sort of doing like a Schindler's List thing. If it doesn't have a waifu schoolgirl at the academy, I'm dropping it. Yeah, I think Party Jams put it perfectly. It's Boichi. There'll be some kind of waifu. I don't think Boichi has ever done a single manga where there wasn't like some kind of waifu character or like cute anime girl in the story. I'm pretty sure he includes at least one like major female character in every manga he's done. Most of them anyway. I don't think it was bad. I just think it's a little too vague. Yeah. It's vague in a good way, but I feel like it's completely understandable if someone reads the first chapter and decides it's like not interesting enough because it doesn't give enough information. I know what you're talking about, but I think it's going for a Sin City look with its color grading. That could be true as well. Again, it feels like Boichi's doing different things, so I'm not really sure. The other thing that again could easily be solved in the next few chapters is I feel like it's very weird that Jim Godspeed is like, okay, so I'm going to go to the Marshal Institute now. We cut and it says, and so I reached the town and was approved to enroll in the academy. And then we cut a week later and he's out in the wild eating mice again. So, and then he says, well, I guess it's high time I got my school life on the road. So, I'm not too sure. Again, this could easily be solved with the next chapter, and they just, like, it's all about the Marshal Institute. But to me, it feels weird that we don't see the Marshal Institute in this first chapter. It's like an oddly vague chapter, and there's like a lot of hiding and like blending with M. Godspeed, Jim, the Desperados, and the sheriff's posse. And I kind of wish Boichi had included one of the marshals or like the Marshal Institute in this first chapter. At least some kind of cameo towards the very end. But overall, I really like this chapter. I'd give it like a 6 or 7, probably closer to a 6. It's a good first chapter. It has me very invested, but I feel like it's a little too vague for my liking. And especially with Jim, I feel like I don't know nearly enough about him to the point where I'm excited about this character. I'm certainly invested in him. I want to find out his history with his father, if he really is like the Boichi Boba Fett that I think he is, and like what this whole Marshal thing is going to play out like. But I feel like I don't know just enough about Jim to the point where like, oh, that's a badass character. I like him so far, but Boichi definitely needs to flesh him out fast, at least personality wise and like motivation wise. I don't need to know everything about him. I like that he's mysterious, but I would like something more to work with. Excuse me. I'm going to take one look at the comments and then we're going to wrap this up. Hope the Academy bros don't bully Jimmy for being a criminal son. I can almost guarantee that's what's going to happen. Does it have potential to become a series though? Considering who this is, I mean, Boichi has done a ton of manga, And this is Jump Plus too, so unless it's really bad, they're not going to cut you. So I would say, I would say this manga will probably go for at least 100 chapters. Which, if I'm not mistaken, what would that bring us out to? I'm just going to pull up a random manga. So Bleach. Yeah, so I would say this manga is going to get like at least 10 volumes. It just depends on like how much Boichi wants to do with the story. Again, he introduces it and says this is part 1. So it feels like it's going to be at least a 2 or 3 part story, which would imply it's going to be at least 100 chapters, right? Because if you're doing a 2 or 3 part story and it's only like 80 chapters, 60 chapters, that's kind of cutting it close. I hope Boichi makes a move with chapter 2 like Kagurabachi did with his first 2 chapters, which helped explain things better. Yeah, I agree. I feel like Boichi really needs to flesh some stuff out in chapter 2. Jump Plus has more turnover than we think, but Boichi should be safe. Yeah, Jump Plus isn't like this like Wonderland where people can just like make whatever and like it never gets cut. Where the Indian riding robot horses. I don't know how much that trope is going to be used due to current political tastes, so to speak. Although Japan is different, so we might see. But for the case of Jump Plus, like I'll never forget Diamond in the Rough. I actually want to look that up because I forgot when that got cut. Or it's just not going to work? Okay. Can I not look stuff up? Okay, that's kind of awkward. It's kind of weird. Why can't I type stuff? There we go. Diamond in the Rough. Okay. Thanks, Jump Plus. Diamond in the Rough was 73 chapters when they decided to cut it. So, just because Jump Plus, you know, is like this, like, oh yeah, publish whenever you want, you know, make darker stories, we don't care. It doesn't mean like they don't have like cutoffs for manga. That being said, I feel like Boichi has it pretty safe. Like he's good, as long as he doesn't completely bomb this, which he's got quite the number of manga under his belt. I think he'll do just fine. As long as he doesn't completely drop the ball with this manga, I think he'll be just fine. Diamond in the Rough had a decent length. Some of my more recent readings have been much shorter. Yeah, No Name was, what, like 30 chapters? 40 chapters? Jim dragged a cross-shaped coffin, reference to Simon of Cyrene? I'm not sure. I wouldn't know the reference as well. Am I ever gonna cover the Bleach one-shot sequel? Because it's been on hold for 3 to 4 years when the Bleach anime is complete. I want to do, if you're talking about Burn the Witch, I want to do Burn the Witch content. I'm kind of waiting until we get some news. I could have sworn there was a quote that Kubo was like, oh, it's coming, it's coming. But yeah, for the time being, I'm kind of waiting to do Burn the Witch stuff, but we'll see. I am actually gonna jot that down. Put that on the backlog of video ideas. No Name is 14 chapters. Jesus. Simon carried Jesus' cross for him. Ooh. Anyway, yeah, so we're going to wrap things up. It's been just about an hour. No video this week. I have the video ready, but just timing-wise. So it's a Dr. Stone video, and it's about a certain part of the story that has not been adapted yet. So rather than upload it this weekend, I'm just going to upload it either sometime next week or sometime in the following week when it actually comes out, just because I don't want to spoil anime only fans. We will stream Shonen Jump on Sunday. I am supposed to get a blizzard here in New England, but the weather shouldn't be a problem. Did I hear about Jump doing 9 one-shots? Yeah, I don't know how that's going to work, though. Because those, I don't think those are going to get published. But I am excited to see what comes out of that. I feel like that's something that they should do more of. So Shonen Jump, Sunday, 2 o'clock. I am finally getting my camera and audio setup upgrades. So look forward to live stream Ouji soon. Probably not Sunday, maybe Tuesday. Definitely by next Thursday. Look forward to slightly better audio quality. I'm getting a new audio interface. And yeah, that's pretty much it for now. Thanks everybody. Looking forward to more Marshal King, more Dr. Stone. Thanks for the great discussion. I was glad to hear everybody's thoughts, and I look forward to hearing from you soon.